Your desires aren't accidents, they're signals. Every fantasy, every sudden pull towards someone or something, every image that cuts across your thoughts like a blade carries meaning you probably haven't dared to decode. You can posture, you can laugh it off, you can put on your best "I've got this" voice, but your sexual desire will still broadcast truths you won't admit to yourself even when you're alone in front of the mirror. And here's the part most people find unsettling. Carl Jung argued that what excites you is a message from the unconscious, a flare fired up from the basement of your psyche. Little fragments of your shadow, the parts you've tried to bury under work, manners, religion, routine, and a carefully curated persona. So take a breath and sit with this. What if the preferences you have in bed are a kind of map? What if that just a whim, that private fantasy, is actually a breadcrumb trail leading back to old wounds, unmet needs, fears you carry, and longings you've never named? The things you hide beneath the sheets can speak louder than your most elegant words. What you enjoy today might be the key to who you really are, under all the layers. This video isn't here to flatter your ego or say what's comfortable. It's here to point at what you need to face. What your sexual desire reveals about you, even if the truth makes you a little uneasy. Still with me? Good. Lean in. This is where it gets real. Jung's take is blunt. Sexual desire isn't just a hunt for pleasure. It's the unconscious, talking. What turns you on is not random confetti thrown by your nervous system. It's a reflection of your shadow, that hidden part of you you keep off camera, away from polite company, sometimes away from yourself. When someone is magnetized by the forbidden, for example, that's not simply lust or rebellion. In Jung's language, it points to a psyche trapped in rigid structures, rules, repressions, all the shoulds that clamp down on who you are. In that pressure cooker, desire becomes the release valve, the one place your system lets you breathe. The obsession with what shouldn't be doesn't just poke at morality. It presses on a deep nerve, the lifelong tug of war between the identity you were handed and the nature you actually have. Flip the angle. The person who craves absolute control and intimacy isn't always chasing power for power's sake. Often, it's compensation. In everyday life, they feel vulnerable or sidelined or simply unable to steer their own ship. Desire becomes theater, a stage where they finally get to embody strength that feels out of reach, in the boardroom, in the family, in the social circle. On the other hand, the person who longs to be dominated is often carrying too much responsibility, too many plates spinning, too many "I've got it" moments. Their secret prayer is simple. Rest. Please, just one moment of surrender. Let me put down the weight and stop being the one who holds the world up. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Your body tells the truth, your mind hides. What you repress in your conscious life squeezes out through your fantasies. What you deny in your character reappears as the thing that attracts you. There is always a psychological root. Desire is symbolic. It's your unconscious speaking in code. Every preference, impulse, and recurring image is an encrypted message. If you're willing to decode it, you'll discover rooms inside yourself you didn't know were there. Because sexuality isn't only about pleasure. It's also a language of fear, wounds, emptiness, and longing, the material your conscious mind refuses to examine. That's the sharp edge of Jung's theory. You can't hide your truth while your desire keeps exposing it. Let's go a layer deeper. There is no innocent desire in the sense of being meaningless. Everything has a psychic origin. Think of the person obsessed with the taboo, the socially unacceptable, the off-limits. Jung would say that's the repressed shadow at work. The stricter your internal morality, the more your unconscious craves an escape route. The forbidden glows because it represents the freedom you don't permit yourself. That attraction is a neon sign. Your conscious life is being policed by repression. What about the people drawn to pain, marks, or the drama of visible impact on the body? Many wave this off as just a kink, but psychologically, it can be a request to make the invisible visible. Not only masochism, but an exploration of surrender and the edges of suffering. People with deep emotional injuries sometimes need those wounds acknowledged, and the body becomes the canvas where silent scars finally appear as something you can touch, see, and name. It's a raw way to say, "Here I am. This is what I feel. Don't look away." Now look at the mirror image. Those who fantasize about inflicting pain or holding total dominance, not just sadism. In Jungian terms, this can be the psyche wrestling with its own sense of impotence. The unconscious is shouting, "I want my power back." The thrill isn't harm itself, it's the momentary illusion of invulnerability, the experience of being untouchable in a world where you often feel small or threatened. There's also the craving for multiplicity fantasies involving many partners, a rotating cast, never just one person. That's not simply promiscuity. Symbolically, it's hunger for wholeness. A psyche that feels fragmented can try to fill inner gaps by amassing faces, roles, and bodies. Jung would say that under the surface, there's often a deep sense of not enough, so desire becomes a compulsion to gather the pieces you feel are missing inside. And then don't ignore the opposite end, the longing for tenderness, softness, the ache for gentle contact and unquestioned safety. That has its own psychological reverse. People who crave extreme gentleness often carry a story of hardness, a childhood marked by emotional deprivation, affection that came with conditions, touch that felt transactional. In intimacy, they go looking for what never arrived. Care, warmth, steady presence. What they couldn't find in the world, they search for in the sanctuary of another body. Do you see the pattern? Every sexual impulse works like a metaphor for your emotional biography. The unconscious doesn't throw darts at a board. It selects images, gestures, roles, and scenarios that reflect your fears, your injuries, and your buried desires. Decoding what excites you is like opening a secret diary you've been writing without realizing it. But it doesn't stop with your personal shadow. Jung argued that desire also plugs into the collective unconscious, the realm of archetypes. In simple terms, your fantasies aren't only yours. They're shaped by universal patterns humans have carried across centuries. That's why some people feel a powerful pull toward authority figures, teachers, bosses, leaders. It's not just hierarchy play. It's the father, leader, guardian archetype. If that's your pattern, your unconscious is in conversation with your attitude toward authority. Respectful, resentful, deferential, rebellious. Your fantasy becomes a commentary on how you navigate power in daily life. Flip it again. The person who fantasizes about vulnerable, innocent figures, someone in need of guidance or protection, activates the protector-savior archetype. The unconscious isn't just chasing pleasure, it's trying on a role. Caretaker, rescuer, the one who gives what they couldn't give or didn't receive back then. That desire can be both genuinely tender and quietly desperate, a real instinct to nurture and a craving to feel needed. There's also the universal attraction to mystery, the hidden, the masked, the anonymous. Why do masks and uniforms and strangers with no backstory spark so many imaginations? Jung would call it the raw eruption of the shadow archetype. The unknown attracts because it mirrors what you deny in yourself. The mask the other wears is a reflection of your own inner mask, the self you keep off stage. And beneath everything, another pair of archetypes keeps pulsing, anima and animus. The inner feminine in men, the inner masculine in women, and more broadly, the balancing opposite within any psyche. When you feel drawn to someone who stirs something beyond ordinary attraction, your unconscious may be reaching for its missing counterpart. Desire becomes a bridge not only toward the other person, but toward the disowned part of yourself. So here's the hard question to close out this first section. If your desires echo ancient patterns, how free are you in what you crave? Are you choosing or are you repeating a script your psyche inherited long before you had words for it? Let's turn the lens one more time. What if your desires aren't only windows into the past or collages of universal symbols, but also forecasts? Jung talked about the perspective function of the unconscious, its way of pointing toward what your psyche will need next. In that light, fantasy is not just a rerun, it's a trailer. The image that refuses to leave you alone, the scene that loops in the background while you're washing dishes or scrolling at midnight, those may be early signals of a psychological shift you haven't made yet. Picture someone who keeps dreaming of being watched center stage, every eye on them in an intimate scene. That's not merely exhibitionism for shock value. It can be a pressure wave from a silenced part of the self demanding recognition. The unconscious announces it in the most private theater before it breaks into the public one. Another person keeps fantasizing about disappearing, blending into the dark, vanishing behind a mask, melting into the quiet corner of the room. That might be a rehearsal for survival in a life that's about to get overexposed. In both cases, desire doesn't lie, it clarifies. While the conscious mind invents excuses, the unconscious draws a simple map. Go here. This is why confronting your fantasies isn't self-indulgence, it's navigation. The attraction that embarrasses you might be the missing link between who you are and who you're becoming. Jung would say, Don't worship your desire and don't demonize it. Translate it. Meet it as a symbol. If you can read the code, you can integrate the lesson instead of acting it out blindly. Now, let's talk about the guilt loop. Many of us have been taught to feel shame for what we imagine. But guilt is a poor compass. It points backward. Curiosity, on the other hand, points forward. Ask better questions. What does this scene give me that my daily life withholds? What role am I trying on here that I'm afraid to claim outside the bedroom? Where does this image show me an unhealed place, an unmet need, a disowned strength? When you switch from, what's wrong with me, to, what is this trying to say? The monster under the bed turns into a messenger at the door. This moves us toward a crucial reframe. Desire as therapy. Jung insisted that meeting the shadow hurts, but it's necessary. Same with your sexuality. Ignore your fantasies and you inflate them. They grow teeth in the dark. Face them with language and they soften. They step into the circle and start negotiating. The goal isn't to act on every impulse. That's not integration. That's compulsion. The goal is to translate the impulse so you can meet the underlying need in a conscious, ethical, adult way. Let's ground this with a few sketches. The controller. If you only feel powerful in scripted scenes, notice where your waking life deprives you of voice and boundary. The work is not to crank the volume of dominance. It's to claim authority in the areas you've abandoned: your schedule, your money, your no, your creative niche. The surrendered. If you only feel safe when someone else takes over, your nervous system might be starved for relief. The work is not to disappear. It's to build structures of support, delegation, clear agreements, honest asks, so that softness isn't a stolen moment but a sustainable rhythm. The forbidden seeker. If you're lit up by the off-limits, your psyche may be thirsting for authentic freedom. The work is not to court disaster. It's to identify which rules are actually yours and which you inherited without consent, then rewrite, one boundary at a time. The witness craver. If you need eyes on you to feel alive, your creativity might be begging to come out of exile. The work is an exhibition for its own sake. It's to bring your voice to the room that matters: your art, your work, your relationships, without outsourcing worth to applause. The caretaker savior. If innocence and vulnerability electrify you, your protector archetype may be overfunctioning because you once felt helpless. The work is not to collect fragile people. It's to tend your own fragility, to practice mutual care so protection doesn't become control. Each sketch points to a principle. The thing you chase in fantasy often names the thing you must practice in daylight. The body speaks poetry. You answer in prose choices, boundaries, conversations, rituals. That's integration. At this point, it's worth addressing a predictable fear. If I look too closely at my fantasies, won't I be consumed by them? That fear is understandable, but it confuses awareness with indulgence. Awareness gives you more options, not fewer. Compulsion thrives on secrecy. Bring the image into language privately at first, with a journal, a therapist, or a trusted partner who understands the difference between confession and performance. Put it into words, not the porn of the scene, but the psychology of the scene. I want to be seen because I've been invisible. I want to vanish because I'm exhausted. I want to rule because I feel ruled. I want to be held because I was dropped. The second you name it, the scene becomes a syllabus. Another hesitation. But isn't desire just animal drive? Partly yes, and thank goodness. You are a body, not just a brain. But the human animal imagines in symbols. We dream in characters and costumes because our psyche learns in metaphor. You don't have to choose between biology and meaning. You contain both. A hunger can be primal and poetic. It can ask for touch and tell a story about power, belonging, or safety. Let's also acknowledge culture's noisy labels. We've been taught to file our desires into neat drawers. Good, bad, healthy, sick, normal, weird. Those labels can protect, but they can also flatten. Jung's invitation isn't to scrap ethics, it's to deepen them. Ethics without self-knowledge turns brittle. Self-knowledge without ethics turns reckless. The task is to hold both, to honor consent, care, and consequence, while refusing the lie that ignorance is purity. If this sounds abstract, consider a simple practice. Notice without editing. When a scene appears, pause, breathe, say, I see you. No praise, no punishment. Name the roles. Who are you in the scene? What role does the other play? Parent, judge, rescuer, rebel, phantom, sovereign. Naming invites the archetypes to step forward. Translate the need. Ask, what quality is this scene giving me? Power, safety, surrender, recognition, absolution, mystery, care? That's the nutrient. Design the daylight version. How can you meet that need ethically in waking life? Through boundary, routine, conversation, art, movement, therapy, spiritual practice. When the need has a healthy outlet, the fantasy relaxes its grip. Review with compassion. No character assassination. No, I'm broken. Curiosity plus accountability, that's the formula. As you practice, you'll notice two shifts. First, the shame volume turns down. You stop confusing secrecy with safety. Second, your choices get cleaner. When you do bring desire into relationship, you do it with clarity and consent, not as a pressure leak, but as a conscious exchange. Before we close this section, let's revisit the question of freedom. If desires echo ancestral symbols, are you truly free? Jung's answer isn't fatalism, it's responsibility. You didn't choose the archetypal deck, but you can choose how you play your hand. Freedom isn't the absence of pattern, it's awareness in pattern. The moment you can say, ah, that's my shadow, that's my protector, that's my anima, animus calling, you gain the power to respond instead of react. And that brings us back to where we started. Desire as compass. Compasses don't shove, they point. You still have to walk. You still have to decide which mountains are worth climbing and which valleys are invitations to rest. But with a compass in your palm, you no longer wander by accident. You move on purpose. Let's bring the mirror even closer. You've learned to notice, to name, to translate. Now comes the hard and beautiful part, integration. Integration means you stop treating your desire like an intruder and start treating it like a teacher. You don't hand it the steering wheel, but you do give it a seat at the table. That balance, neither worship nor war, is where growth lives. First, a reality check. Shadow work isn't glamorous. Movies make transformation look like a montage. A few journal pages, a cathartic cry, and boom, rebirth. Real integration looks slower and smaller. Conversations you'd rather avoid, boundaries you've postponed for years, 10-minute habits repeated until they become the new default. The psyche respects rituals far more than resolutions. So if you want desire to evolve you, bake the lesson into daily life. Here's a simple arc you can reuse. 1. Witness the trigger with compassion. The image appears, the body wakes up. Instead of flinching or performing, breathe. Say to yourself, something in me is talking. Curiosity lowers the temperature. Shame raises it. Extract the principle. Ask, what is the principle under this picture? Maybe it's sovereignty, safety, relief, absolution, mystery, or being chosen. Strip the costume, keep the nutrient. Build a conscious practice. Translate the principle into a repeatable action. Sovereignty, a daily no to one non-essential demand. Safety, a bedtime routine that soothes your nervous system. Relief, scheduled delegation or protected rest. Being chosen, ask directly for what you want in a relationship rather than testing people with silence. Rehearse in low stakes. Don't wait for the hardest moment. Practice the new behavior where the cost of failure is small. Muscles grow on reps, not on vows. Review, refine, recommit. Integration is iterative. You'll overcorrect, slip, learn, and try again. That's not failure. That's how the psyche updates. While you're integrating, keep ethics in the frame. Jung never suggested that the unconscious gives you a hall pass. Desires are information, not instructions. Your body may shout, now, but consent, care, and consequence still get the final vote. A good rule of thumb. If your translation requires secrecy, humiliation, coercion, or self-abandonment, that's not shadow work. That's shadow play. The difference is whether you come away more whole or more split. Let's talk about partners, because desire rarely lives in a vacuum. If you're in a relationship, this work can either become a private war or a shared practice. Choose the practice. You're not dumping fantasies like a confession at a trial. You're offering language for needs so the two of you can design a wiser intimacy. A simple script. Start with ownership. Something in me is looking for X. Recognition, relief, surrender, safety. Add context, not porn. The image that brings it up is Y, but the point isn't the scene, it's the need. Invite collaboration. How can we meet that need together in a way that honors both of us? Set boundaries clearly. Name any hard no's. Ask for your partner's no's. Honor them like guardrails on a cliff road. This is where many discover that the most erotic ingredient isn't novelty. It's nervous system trust. When both people trust that no will be respected, yes gets braver. When both trust that truth won't be weaponized, honesty gets easier. Paradoxically, safety turns up intensity. Now, a word about the myth of union, the anima, animus magnetism that promises completion. Powerful, yes. Also a trap if you take it literally. No partner can permanently carry your missing piece. At best, they evoke it. They invite your inner opposite to wake up and walk around. If every time you feel that archetypal pull you try to outsource wholeness, you'll build a life of melodrama. Intoxicating starts, painful endings, and the same lesson returning with a different face. Integration means thanking the person who woke the sleeping part in you and then doing the work to make that part your own. What about the ache that won't leave? The fantasy that keeps returning even after you've translated it and tended the need? Sometimes that's a sign of repetition, compulsion, your psyche, trying to restage the old wound and fix it with a new ending. The problem with reruns is that the script usually wins. If this is you, widen your support. Bring it to therapy, especially depth-oriented or trauma-informed work. You're not failing, you're respecting the weight of the pattern by getting a spotter for the heavy lift. Let's dismantle a couple more myths that keep people stuck. Myth: if I don't act on my desires, I'm inauthentic. Truth: authenticity is alignment with your values, not obedience to your impulses. Sometimes your most authentic act is restraint. Sometimes it's pursuit. The measure is integrity. Myth: if I name my fantasies, they'll get bigger. Truth: naming usually shrinks them to their true size. Secrecy is a growth chamber. Language is ventilation. Myth: shadow work is only about the dark. It is no one of not asening. They given Tao was all abouters. Truth: Jung also warned about the golden shadow, the strengths you exile. Some fantasies point to buried power, creativity, leadership, and tenderness. Don't just confess the monsters. Claim the medicine. Since you asked for practical, here's a weekly structure you can adopt immediately. Monday mapping. 10 minutes. Note any recurring images or pulls from the last week. Write one sentence per image. The scene, the need, the principle. Wednesday micro practice. Choose one principle and practice it for 15 minutes. If the principle is sovereignty, do one task only you value. If it's softness, schedule a mindful, device-free walk. If it's recognition, share something you made with one trusted person. Friday, debrief. Ask: what shifted? What felt easy? What triggered shame? What boundary or ask would make next week smoother? Adjust one thing. Sunday, ritual. Close the week with a short ritual that marks your intention. A candle, a prayer, a breath practice, a page of gratitude focused on your body. Teach your nervous system that this work is safe, sacred, and sustainable. As we round this out, let's revisit freedom. You can't choose your first thought, but you can choose your second move. You may not control the archetype that knocks, but you control whether you open with wisdom or with habit. That's freedom in a Jungian frame, not the absence of impulse, but the presence of consciousness. And now, the mirror moment. Will you keep denying what your desires reveal, or will you integrate, accept, and use them as a force for transformation? If you've made it this far, something in you is ready. Let's mark it with a line in the comments so the message lands in your muscles, not just your mind. Right, my desire is my compass. Not because desire should rule you, but because it can reliably point you toward the work that makes you whole. Before you click away, a last reminder for the road. Your unconscious doesn't hate you, it wants you. Desire is not the enemy, denial is. Curiosity is stronger than guilt. Translation beats compulsion. Safety makes depth possible. And integration, slow, honest, ethical, turns attraction into instruction. Close your eyes for a breath. Picture that inner compass, the one you've been carrying since before you had words. Feel the needle steady. You don't have to sprint. You don't have to solve your whole story tonight. Just take the next aligned step. When you do, the old cell door, the one you thought was locked from the outside, tends to swing. If this helped, subscribe. What's coming next will take these ideas further into creativity, money, power, and the ways the shadow sneaks into our niche choices without us noticing. Until then, walk gently, look honestly, and keep the compass where you can see it.